While some factions mean to amass hoards of cursed treasure, others unlock the secret of the dead, some simply try to make the most profit, the Bilge Rats embrace the adventure that comes with a pirate's life, and this is where our story begins, with their newest recruit, Stitcher Jim. Stitcher Jim was a shady character and was no stranger to the Sea of Thieves, but his last misadventure found him marooned within the Devil's Roar. Sometime later, his luck would change when he was finally rescued by a masked stranger. Now free from the Devil's Roar, Jim would join the Bilge Rats, but first he wanted to prove himself to Duke, the Bilge Rats representative, and he would stay with his rescuer on an unmarked island. While Jim focused on helping Duke by setting up trade routes so Duke could get rid of some of his more unwanted goods, the masked stranger began constructing something on this unmarked island, but what he was building and why remained a mystery. After some time, an eerie fog enveloped one of the old skeleton forts. Jim would investigate only to find that this was the result of a skeletal ritual using dark relics. These dark relics had been stolen prior. They were all thought to have been recovered, but apparently not. Further investigation revealed the purpose of this fort. It was to be used for yet another ritual, this time to bring forth the spirit of our once great and powerful skeleton lord known as Captain Greymarrow. With the increase of skeleton activity, Duke became worried and left his post to seek out Lorena, the leader of the Bilge Rats. In Duke's absence, Jim would take over the responsibilities of the Bilge Rats in the area and would be hiring crews to amass treasures and find hidden artifacts around the Sea of Thieves. During this time, at Shipwreck Bay, in the captain's quarters of the wreck of the Black Witch that rests upon her shores, more dark relics had appeared. These dark relics had been used for another ritual, but this time it was to free Sir Arthur Pendragon, whose very soul had been trapped within the portrait within the captain's quarters of the Black Witch. Sir Arthur Pendragon was a champion for the Order of Souls, and by wielding his enchanted sword, he would travel the seas, finding lost souls of those who had been stranded within the Sea of Thieves, releasing them so that they could pass on to the Sea of the Damned. This very magic, however, would be his undoing, for when he was struck down by a ferocious foe, the foe used this magic to force Pendragon's soul into the portrait, and there his soul remained until now. Pendragon did not know who rescued him, but the man who did informed Pendragon that the same magic that trapped him inside the portrait had been used on countless other captains across the Sea of Thieves. The rescuer mentioned 3 captains in particular. All had fallen in battle to a ship known as the Ashen Dragon. Desperate to make up for lost time, Pendragon, along with a crew and the help of his magical lantern which would reveal the moments leading up to one's death, would set out to free these captains. The first went down with their ship. The second was executed on land. The third captain, however, was being held prisoner on the Ashen Dragon itself. Following the trails of the echoes of the past, Pendragon and the crew made their way to Flintlock Peninsula. It was there they saw the crew of the Ashen Dragon had offloaded the remains of the trapped soul. Wanting to waste no more time, Pendragon hurried to the resting place of this poor soul, obtained the skull, and began performing the ritual so that the spirit could pass on to the Sea of the Damned once and for all. However, something was clearly wrong. When Pendragon began performing the ritual, he started to struggle. The mystic green aura which would show itself from his sword when performing these rituals turned into a fiery red. Eventually, the skull began to give way and crack. Then, finally, it shattered. As soon as the skull was destroyed, a fiery visage manifested in the sky. It was Lord Flameheart, one of the sea's most vicious and bloodthirsty pirates. His booming voice, filled with hate and disdain, promised a day he would return from the Sea of the Damned and burn the Sea of Thieves to ash. Horrified by the evil he had unwittingly released, before he vanished, Pendragon could only muster a few words.
What have we done?
Even with Flameheart's soul now free, it remained within the Sea of the Damned, and the Sea of Thieves was quiet as its inhabitants grew tense, wondering when Flameheart would make his promised return. Duke would also make his return, albeit battered and bruised. When asked if he had found the Bilge Rats' leader, he would reveal that this was the first time he had ever heard of getting her involved. It seemed Duke was looking into things himself and finally discovered what he believed to be Flameheart's lair. Within this time, the masked stranger had also made progress with her construction, and it even began paying pirates double what the other trading companies were for their loot. What she was building still remained a mystery. Pendragon would reappear, this time in the Devil's Roar, after receiving news from the Order of Souls that his old crew were in danger. They informed him that the souls of his crewmates had been bound into dark relics and placed within a cursed chest. This chest was to be used for a ritual to summon forth an Ashen Lord. These Ashen Lords were strong skeletons and commanders in Flameheart's army, but after his demise, they soon vanished. Pendragon would also learn that the man responsible for this act was the same one that released him from his prison and used him to free Flameheart. That man was Stitcher Jim. Pendragon would hire a crew to help track down Jim and retrieve the souls of his lost crewmates. With the aid of a journal that belonged to a pirate that Jim had betrayed in the past, they were able to find Jim's secret hideout. Once at Jim's hideout, they were able to find clues that pointed to Flameheart's lair, the Heart of Fire, and this is where the ritual would take place. Once Pendragon and the crew located the Heart of Fire, the crew would enter alone. They would be faced with a network of tunnels filled with traps, chasms, and fiery skeleton minions. While traversing this labyrinth, Flameheart's voice boomed through the caverns mockingly at their feeble attempts to stop him. They finally reached the end of the maze, and it opened into a large cave with a lake of lava running through it. Sat upon the pool of lava was the most spectacular and terrifying image, that of the Burning Blade, Flameheart's very own ship. On a platform across the lava was Jim, holding the Chest of Rage. Triumphantly, he reached in to begin the ritual that would summon forth an Ashen Lord. However, his joy turned to pain. He screamed as he pulled out his arm in agony, scorched and burning red, as Flameheart laughed on mockingly. Believing himself to have been betrayed by his master, Jim took off into the caves with a door closing behind him. With Flameheart's plan now seamlessly complete, he had no use to the chests, and the crew would take it back to Pendragon. Pendragon, fearing it was too late to save his crew, drove his sword into the chest in an attempt to reverse Flameheart's ritual. With all his might and determination, the souls of his crew manifested by his side, safe and free. With his soul free and his ship in his possession, Flameheart began his assault on the Sea of Thieves. With his strong understanding of the supernatural, he would pierce the veil between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, and send ghostly fleets in his ship to raid the islands and terrorize the seas. Following this, his Ashen Lords would return. These strong skeleton lords with a heart of fire began to lay waste to the pirates of the Sea of Thieves. Flameheart and his Ashen Lord commanders were not the only threat to come to the seas, for the masked stranger had finally finished the construction she had been working on for so long. What was once an unmarked island now had fortifications, cannons, and a large building. Inside this building, a new face, the Servant of the Flame. This man and the building were the base of a new faction, one that seemed to follow Flameheart's ideologies, and as they would claim, the true pirate's life. This new faction would be named the Reaper's Bones. This new faction encouraged true piracy, battle and bloodshed, thievery, and most importantly, freedom, and they would repay their members with more riches than the other trading companies would. With Flameheart getting stronger, and learning of Duke's inadvertent involvement in it, the leader of the Bilge Rats would arrive at the outposts. Seeing the state of Duke, and how comfortable he had gotten running things from behind the tavern table, she banned him from the outpost in hopes he would remember what it would be like to be a pirate, and more importantly, what being a Bilge Rat was all about. Duke would then spend the next several months travelling from island to island in search for adventure and a treasure of value. But as time passed, Duke became more and more distant and lost. He was last seen staring blankly out into the ocean before disappearing without a trace. Flameheart would eventually stop sending his ghostly fleets to attack the seas, but although he had appeared to have gone, his Ashen Lords and the Reaper's Bones remained. However, many pirates had learned the signs of an Ashen Lord's appearance and how to avoid conflict. As for the Reaper's Bones, they had become accepted like any other trading company, whether by faithful followers or just greedy pirates hoping to earn some extra gold. Within this time, a new threat would emerge, that being one Davy Jones. Davy Jones would enter the Sea of Thieves following Captain Jack Sparrow to retrieve a relic that Jack had stolen, a relic able to transport those who use it anywhere. After arriving in the Sea of Thieves and retrieving his treasure, Jones had grown disgusted by how death meant nothing within the Sea of Thieves and sought to take control of the Ferry of the Damned and the Sea of Thieves. To do this, he formed the Dark Brethren. The members of the Dark Brethren all joined for their own reasons. The Gold Hoarder's allegiance was brought with ancient Aztec gold. The Siren Queen joined out of hatred for the pirates of the Sea of Thieves for what they had done to her and her kind. Duke had also found himself within the ranks of the Dark Brethren. After becoming an outcast, the Siren Queen called to him, and he answered the call. Originally meant to be her next victim, Duke was spared by the intervention of the final member of the Dark Brethren. The last and probably most surprising member was the Masked Stranger, or as she would now go by, the Warsmith. She joined for the simple reason of revenge. For you see, the weaponsmith's relationship with Flameheart spanned back several years, when an old weaponsmith of Golden Sands discovered a cursed cannon that had been part of Flameheart's ship. This cursed cannon would affect her mind as she became more devoted to Flameheart, and would eventually transform her body into that of a skeleton lord. However, the Warsmith did not follow Flameheart out of loyalty alone, but out of love. But, after everything she had done for him and his cause, when his soul was finally free, her love was not returned, and he cast her aside, seemingly with no other use for her. So now she seeks to ruin his plans by ensuring Davy Jones's victory. However, the Dark Brethren did not fare well against Captain Jack and the crews of the Sea of Thieves. The Siren Queen was the first to fall, next was the Gold Hoarder, and then Davy Jones himself. Once again there was an uneasy calm, but that would soon change. A mysterious fog, much like the one that shrouds the Fort of the Damned, fell upon Golden Sands and its inhabitants vanished. This fog would also engulf Shipwreck Bay. Sensing something more sinister, a strange pirate with strange abilities named Belle, who had been residing within the Sea of the Damned, would make her way to the world of the living to investigate. Within the fog of Shipwreck Bay, Belle, with the aid of a crew, found echoes of events past, events involving the Servant of the Flame, whose echo showed him pledging himself to his father, Captain Flameheart. The Servant and his followers had worked to summon an entity from the land of the dead, an entity to fight in their ranks, a Soulflame captain. Belle and the crew would strike down this new threat, but it was only later they learnt of the error that they had made. These Soulflame captains were never intended to join the ranks of Flameheart's army, but were instead going to be used for a sacrifice, for when a Soulflame captain is slain, it releases a strong energy that weakens the veil between the worlds. So, Belle and her helpers had unwittingly completed the Servant's plans. With the veil now weakened, Flameheart managed to manifest battlements from the Sea of the Damned, along with the phantoms of the men that once protected them in life. Flameheart and the Servant of the Flame would use these places to imprison their enemies. This included the inhabitants of Golden Sands. The reason for their targeting of Golden Sands was the Golden Sands resident weaponsmith, Wanda. Wanda was a skilled weaponsmith, as skilled as her sister of a similar name, the same sister who was once devoted to Flameheart. Flameheart wanted to recruit Wanda to replace her sister, but upon her refusal, he captured the people of Golden Sands to force her to join. Luckily, Belle managed to organise a crew that would free Wanda and the others before it was too late. Upon questioning after their release, the people of Golden Sands mentioned that they heard the guards talking about how Flameheart had another prisoner, a member of a forgotten people that came before, that once ruled the seas and then vanished. That being an ancient. Bill concluded the reason Flameheart would want an ancient was to attain information about an artifact that would allow Flameheart's forces to pass through the barrier of the worlds freely, the Veil of the Ancients. Luckily, Belle knew of the Veil's last known location and who to talk to find it. The man who could help was retired hunter turned local fisherman Merrick. The reason for this was that the last known location of the Veil of the Ancients was when it was swallowed by a megalodon that with the power of the artifact became legendary for its elusivity, so much so that its very existence was argued. Merrick, however, never stopped believing. He knew it was real, he'd seen it. Even if it had made him the laughingstock, he would still believe. It was for this reason that Belle asked Merrick for his aid, and took him on a new version of his old ship to hunt down the Shrouded Ghost. They unfortunately ran aground, and would have to enlist the aid from others. The other pirates would hunt lesser megalodons, and trap their souls in special trinkets, and then use them along with Merrick's special shanty to call forth the Shrouded Ghost. The plan worked, and after a fierce fight with both the Beast and Flameheart's spectral fleet, which had come to intercept the Veil of the Ancients, the artifact lay safe with Belle and Merrick. In the midst of the battle, Pendragon and his ship arrived to lend aid, and after all was done, he would take the artifact to the Pirate Lord for safekeeping. After his adventures with Belle, Merrick's flame had been relit, and with a new sense of purpose, he headed to Golden Sands to help rebuild. The eerie fog still lingered, but the people were adamant on fixing their homes. The Reapers, on the other hand, would not let Golden Sands go so easily. The Reapers would sneak ashore and bury dark relics, or smuggle special explosive infused with raw soul flame to the outpost and ignite them. Each explosion was another dent in the barrier. The fog would thicken and ghostly figures could be spotted on the outpost. Merrick would organise crews to intercept the Reapers and bring much needed building supplies to the outpost. As the tug of war for control of Golden Sands came to an end, it would be Merrick and the crews that helped that stood victorious, and the fog would slowly clear. With the Reapers defeated and reconstruction of Golden Sands underway, Merrick would take his leave and head back to his fishing spot. However, he would go missing shortly after. Belle managed to track down Merrick's last location, and using her lantern saw the images of what unfolded, and what she saw was not good, for it seemed Merrick had been murdered. She would gather a crew who would follow a trail of clues that would finally reveal the murderer to be Amaranta. Amaranta was the newest member of the Dark Brethren, and was ordered to send Merrick's soul to the Dark Brethren, who had been hiding within the Sea of the Damned, and in return be given instructions on how to join them there. When confronted, she used a newly forged artifact to transport herself to the Sea of the Damned, where it was revealed that the Dark Brethren had Merrick captive. After hearing of Merrick's fate, the Pirate Lord himself got involved, and used the Veil of the Ancients to open a portal to the Sea of the Damned so that crews could mount a rescue mission. The crews were able to fight through the Brethren's forces and free Merrick, but Merrick had a hard choice to make. Knowing the Dark Brethren would stop at nothing to get what they wanted, Merrick chose to remain lost within the Sea of the Damned to protect those he cared about. Luckily, the Pirate Lord had another idea, one that would leave the Dark Brethren believing Merrick's soul was indeed lost, but also keeping him safe. And so, Merrick would reside within the Pirate Legend's hideout from now on. While investigating Stitch Jim's abandoned hideout, Belle would stumble across vital information hidden within a book. The book spoke of a time of resurrection brought about by the Herald of the Flame. Fearing this meant that the Reapers intended to resurrect Flameheart, Belle went to contact allies that she had made within the Sea of the Damned. These allies were the Ancients, who had left the Sea of Thieves long ago. With the barrier of both worlds in jeopardy, the Ancients agreed to help. In return, all that they asked was that the scattered remains of their great warrior be returned to them so they could summon him to help in the battle to come. This request was fulfilled, and the Ancients promised that they would be ready to fight if the time came. With allies secured, Belle focused on stopping the time of resurrection altogether, and to do so, she needed to find the Herald of the Flame who would set all this in motion. Her only suspect was Stitcher Jim, and not wanting to reveal her hand too soon and risk the real Herald of the Flame going deep into hiding if she was mistaken, Belle would send Pendragon and a crew to find out what happened to Jim after his time in Flameheart's lair all those months ago. With a flame of fate, Pendragon and the crew were able to uncover Jim's fate. After Jim had placed his arm within the chest of rage, only to be met with an agonizing burning pain, Jim fled. Believing to have been betrayed by his beloved and Flameheart, Jim put as much distance between himself and them as possible, and would go into hiding within one of the old ancient vaults. Over time, Flameheart's effect could be felt on Jim's mind, and to rid himself of this, Jim set out to Flameheart's resting place to destroy his remains. But once he got there, he was met by the Servant of the Flame. The servant explained to Jim that he had not been betrayed, but gifted a great power and an even greater task. Jim was chosen to become the Herald of the Flame as foretold in the texts. Jim accepted this new responsibility and began work on reconstructing the remains of Flameheart. After learning of this, Belle was informed by her allies of the location of the ritual site to resurrect Flameheart. She infused Pendragon's sword with the power to destroy Flameheart's skull and stop any chance of him being resurrected. When Pendragon and the crew arrived at Molten Sands Fortress, they witnessed Jim as he transformed from his normal self into a hulking, fiery skeletal figure. Jim, by accepting his fate, had not only become the Herald of the Flame in title alone, but had also become an Ashen Lord. A fight broke out as the Herald attempted to fight off the intruders. He would unleash the full strength of an Ashen Lord upon them. He would summon ashen skeletons to fight by his side and open the skies to rain hellfire upon the fort. After a long and grueling battle, Jim was finally defeated, and Pendragon was free to destroy Flameheart's skull. Once the task was complete, the crew would sail back to Belle and inform her of the news, while Pendragon would finish off some last-minute things. Belle was happy to hear of the mission's success, but her happiness was short-lived when Pendragon arrived and informed them that while he was tying up loose ends, both Flameheart's and Jim's remains had vanished. With the time of resurrection aligning with the Festival of the Damned, which was just a few weeks away, a new plan had to be formed, and fast. Bella and Pendragon attempted to perform the ritual themselves, but instead to call forth Flameheart's soul so that they could trap it once again. Unfortunately, their attempts were unsuccessful, and the time of resurrection was upon them. The Reapers had everything they needed, the sea forts, each housing a flame of fate in a particular order across the seas. Bewitched relics, charged by the power that the forts would channel, and a vessel, made up from the remains of Flameheart, but spliced together with the skull of the Herald of the Flame. Everything was in place. With no time left, Pendragon performed his own rite. Planting his sword into a portrait, he and Belle would try to redirect the power of the forts in hopes to intercept the resurrection ritual and throw Flameheart's soul into exile. But this act of desperation came with a great risk. If Pendragon and Belle were unable to succeed, it would be Pendragon's soul cast into exile. A new tug of war would begin. Those loyal to the Reapers and Flameheart would try and hold all the sea forts while delivering bewitched relics to the resurrection site at Reaper's hideout. Those who fought against Flameheart would attempt to take control of the forts. It was a long battle, but only one side could win, and that side was the Reapers. The Servant had succeeded. In harnessing the powers of the Sea of the Damned, he would return Flameheart's soul to his skeletal remains, resurrecting the bloodthirsty skeleton Lord Flameheart to wreak havoc upon the Sea of Thieves once again. Pendragon, on the other hand, paid the price and was lost forever. With Flameheart's return, the Sea of Thieves turned into a war zone between those loyal to Flameheart and those loyal to the Pirate Lord, a war that still rages to this day.